All right, ladies, welcome to this episode of the Joyful Scaling Podcast. Today, we're talking about something that I've never talked about before, and it's something you need to know about. It's about preparing your service-based business for sale, creating an exit strategy. And I'm blessed to be here with the authority on the subject, Erin Austin. Hey, Erin, how are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for our discussion today.
Oh my goodness, me too, because you have so much knowledge and I know I'm going to learn a ton. I just want to briefly give the ladies a flavor of this extraordinary woman that you are. Okay. Erin is a consultant and a lawyer. She's the founder of Think Beyond IP, where she helps female founders of expertise-based service firms create and protect saleable assets so they can use their businesses to create generational wealth. And I love that Erin has a special passion, as I do, for working with female founders, because wealth in the hands of us girls, of us women, and I say girls with all the excitement and passion that I have for women, with the wealth in our hands, we truly can change the world. Erin is a graduate of Harvard Law School. She has been in-house, outside counsel, and an executive in both large and small companies. And she's a sought-after podcast guest, and you're going to know why in just a moment. So, Erin, so happy to have you here. I would love to start with the question that I'm sure some of my listeners may have right out of the gate. Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about an exit strategy? And why should I be thinking about it now if I am not there yet?
Yeah, so great questions. A couple of things. First, when we're talking about an exit strategy, especially for the service-based business, when an acquirer is thinking about whether or not they want to acquire your business, they're going to look at it and see if it has a couple of key elements. One is if you have some exclusivity built into it. One, if you have sustainability built into it. So these are things that you need to be working on ahead of time. You can't wait until you're ready to exit or until somebody comes to look at you. Because sometimes people will come even when you're not looking, right? You may just be busy, providing great services to your clients, and someone comes to you. So we want to make sure we have those things in place ahead of time. And when you are service-based, of course, your assets are intellectual. So they are creatures of contract and intellectual property law. And so they aren't things that are sitting on the shelf. So we need to make sure we're protecting those things as we're creating them. So you have to get ahead of that asset creation piece.
Okay. And this is great. I'm going to land here. As a lawyer, I know IP, intellectual property, but for those out there that may not be as familiar, when we're talking about these intangible assets that can be and should be protected in the number of different ways, like copyright and trademark, things like that, can we just kind of get real granular on what that looks like for the clients that you work with so that we can all be on the same page in what we're talking about?
Sure. So mostly for the service-based business, the intellectual property rights we're going to be thinking about mostly will be the copyrights and the trademarks. So the copyrights are the things when you have expressed something in either in writing, painting, film. So you have major ideas solidified. Then you have a copyright in those things. So let's say you have written a book, or you have articles, or you have training materials. As soon as you put those things in concrete form, you create a copyright and you own those things. But also you can get those rights by contract. And so you can get those when you hire a third party. So let's say you provide a creative service and you need the help of a third party to deliver it. So let's say you are a website designer and you have some graphics that you need to have created for you. And so you hire a third party, a subcontractor, to help you create those graphics. So you need to also get the intellectual property rights in those graphics from the subcontractor. And since you're not creating them, you get those rights by contract. And then we need to also look at when you're hired by your clients will want to receive the intellectual property rights in the things that you're delivering to them. So we need to look at those contracts to make sure that we understand what part of those deliverables are your your pre-existing intellectual property that you want to hang on to, and what part of those deliverables are original for the client, and so they'll be transferred by contract to the client. So we have the rights that are created just through intellectual property law by creation, and then we have those that are transferred, either transferred in or transferred out by contract. So those are the main issues in a service-based business.
This is so good because I want to go with the contract with the subcontractor. For example, someone who's creating the graphics or the web designer, because I think that we too easily as clients, we just kind of, and maybe I would feel the same if I hadn't gone to law school, right? But when a contract comes from a vendor, we kind of sort of read it. I think a lot of lay people understand maybe 70 to 80% of it, and they don't ask the questions that they're not sure of, and or they don't realize that they could push back, as I call it, and say, you know what, wait a minute. In, paragraph 52 here, it seems to suggest that the logos and things you're presenting to me that I won't own them. Would you please help me understand? Will I own them? So I would love you to maybe examples of situations that you've seen where, clients have slipped up and missed opportunities, or can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most either clients or subcontractors, either way, may have their own standard templates that they will send to you. And so when you're working with your subcontractors, like they may say that they may not have any language in there about who will own the deliverables. It may just be, you're going to pay me this and I'm going to deliver that. And if there isn't like the magic language in there that says that you will receive the rights in what they create, then they keep it. It doesn't matter that you paid them for it. Doesn't matter that you told them what to do. Unless you have the magic assignment words in the written agreement, the contractor will continue to own the rights in there. So you want to make sure that there's rights language in your contractor agreements that says that you will own the deliverables. And if your subcontractor has some original materials that they'll be using, first of all, you want to know that, because that means you don't own whatever's theirs. So you need to know that, but assuming that it's going to all be original and you want to own it all, then you need to make sure that that's what it says. And I'll give you, I think, it was actually on one of the podcasts that I was on where the host had hired a subcontractor to help him with a client project, and he didn't have an agreement at all. So the subcontractor, provided the service, deliverable, however, no agreement. Therefore, the subcontractor still owns the work. You have a license to use it, but it's a non-exclusive license, which isn't that interesting when you have an end client that expects to own the original materials that you're providing to them. And he got in a fair amount of trouble because of that. And so you have to make sure you own all those rights from anyone you're working with if you have to deliver them to your client. And then on the other end, we have a client agreement. A lot of client agreements will come in that say that we own absolutely everything that you create. And so you need to make sure, again, that you're looking at that language. It might say intellectual property, it might say that. It might say work product. It might say deliverables. There's lots of kind of headings that you want to look for to make sure that you really kind of are reading that language and understand exactly, what rights you're granting to your client and what you're retaining.
Okay. And so I always like to anticipate my audience's reaction. So ladies, if you're listening and you are kind of like, if I were in your shoes and I didn't know what I know after going through 3 years of law school and, 20 plus years out in practice, your reaction right now is probably, oh my God, my mind is exploding. What is the difference between license versus ownership versus trademark and copyright? Look, this is not a deep dive into the law, but I think that this, Erin, speaks to the fact that when we're talking about your business, you're not a hobbyist. If you're following me, you're not a hobbyist. You're not a trier. You are legit business owner looking to scale, to the $500,000 and the 7 figures and beyond. And so you can't DIY this. The law is so specific, both on a federal level with federal protection and each state's law. So when I tell you, you need a specialist, a business law specialist on speed dial. It just is the case. Would you agree with that, Erin?
Absolutely, absolutely. And mostly because people are a little bit, I think sometimes people are afraid to like, they feel like it might be adversarial to comment on contracts that they receive from clients. And they really shouldn't feel that way, that getting the lawyers involved is somehow like we're no longer building a relationship. We're now, but it's not. I mean, I like to look at contracts as a relationship document. It really helps, everyone understand what the expectations are and the parameters and what success looks like. So that's a good thing. We want those things kind of understood and agreed at the outset. So, and a good lawyer will help you one understand, but also understand like what the acceptable terms are like in the industry or and so that they understand the boundaries of the negotiation. And I will say, I think you mentioned that people think they can't comment on agreements, but I've been doing this for 30 years, and I can say one time, and there was one time, and it was one of the biggest companies in the world that said, just sign it. And we're like, okay. But other than that, like, some Fortune 500 companies, they will still, take comments. Yes.
Yeah. And they say, okay, you want to work with me? Then this is the contract. Then you decide, okay, with the provisions as they are, do I want to agree with this? But it's so funny. I had mentioned this, I think, in another episode, Erin, where when I was in-house counsel and we had a very my client focused contract, of course, we want to protect us. Right. And if the other side didn't come back and balk at a couple of key provisions, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a walkover. So understand, ladies, that this is expected. This dance, it is a negotiation. And I love how Erin just said, this is about an ongoing relationship, and it sets the terms to avoid any misunderstanding or confusion going forward. So, all right, that's excellent. Okay. So I want to just talk about, things that are subject to trademark, because again, before we get into the exit thing, which I know we're going to address for the most part, but things to trademark. Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that there's a lot of confusion on this. Can I trademark my name, for example, or my brand name or my courses and that kind of thing? Could you address that, Erin?
Yeah. Well, the things that you can trademark are those things that are unique and that will attribute the source of a good or service. So if you have a very unique name, I do believe celebrities trademark their names, I'm pretty sure, and that since they have this kind of secondary meaning in the market. So these are the types of things that you'd want to have trademarked, so that something's coming from Kylie Jenner. I don't know. I think they all have, we know that it's Kylie Jenner's. Nobody else can use that. If you, joyful scaling, like you trademark that. So everyone knows that if it's got the joyful scaling name on it, that it's coming from you. And some of the things that many service providers will trademark, maybe their name, but it also may be, if they have a framework or a solution that is unique to them. So that is where I most commonly see it. So it's something where they know that if they're getting the, the Rocket framework for creating websites, that the Rocket framework, the Rocket website framework has been trademarked, that they know exactly who it came from and what they can expect to receive when they get that good or service. So to qualify for a trademark, you will have to go through a process with the trademark office where they will look to see if it would be confusingly similar to another already registered trademark. So it really needs to be somewhat unique. And also the level of protection will depend on how unusual it is. So let's go to the Rocket website. And, if it may be unique enough that nobody else has one like that. But if it could be that, Rocket websites, it's kind of an ordinary use of the term website. So you may still get the trademark because nobody else has it, but whether or not the strength of that trademark, if somebody else wants to do something similar, like Rocket Fuel website, it will depend on the strength, how unique that trademark is. So Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some art to getting a trademark approved as much as science. Another example of working with a trademark lawyer because they know, like kind of the types of things that will get through, the strength of the protection, and can save you like a lot of headache of, rejections and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, again, I'm all about strategy, and I know you've got a strategic mind. So that is the benefit of a lawyer, not just filing the paperwork, but really asking you the questions. What are your future goals? And what do you see for this signature framework? Or how will you use it? Were you going to put it into a book, or, how are you going to be using it in the future? And so that maybe as they look and review what's already been trademarked, they can even suggest other names or other, so there's a lot behind the trademark application. But anyway, okay. So now you know enough to be dangerous on that, listeners. Okay. So let's talk about the exit strategy. And in particular, what is the difference between sellable and saleable as it relates to the exit strategy?
Yeah, thanks. So sellable, I like to use the analogy of a car. So let's say you have a car, you have the title free and clear, you don't own any money on it, there aren't any co-signers. And so you are able to sell that car. It is sellable because you have the rights required to sell it. But let's say it, can't pass inspection, it's being held together by duct tape, it's, one of the doors is missing. Like, yes, it's sellable, but is it saleable? Like, no, because there has to be a market for something for it to be saleable. So it has to have some value to third parties. And so when we talk about businesses, like we have with service-based business in particular, where the assets are intangible, like you can have a business that, you have all the contracts, you have, everything that you need, that you would be able to sell it. But if you don't have assets that would be valuable in the hands of a third party, then it's not saleable. So if you have a business that has a very good income generator, but it is one that is not scalable, it is one where you're billing by the hour or it requires your particular expertise in order for it to work. If you don't have any assets, let's say you are using a framework that you've licensed from a third party. A lot of service providers do that. They don't have their own framework. So even though it may be a viable income producer, it would not have value in the hands of a third party. And so we want to make sure that you're building a business that has assets that are exclusive to you and that has a business model that is scalable and therefore transferable.
Okay. Wow. That is so good. Okay. So I work more and more with professional service firm owners, lawyers, architects, accountants, interior design firms, real estate brokers. So when, you can choose any one of those, I would just love to give an example of kind of, let's have a starting point for one of these. Let's choose interior designers. Okay. That's interior design firm. There is an owner. She's got, 3 or 4 other designers, and she has a particular style and aesthetic that is sought after locally. What should she be thinking about? If she's hoping in 10 or 15 years to sell this interior design firm?
Well, she wants to make sure that people aren't coming just for her. First of all. So they want to make sure that it is the result that the firm provides and not her in particular, so she is creating a process that could be followed by a third party or by her team so that she would not be the sole revenue driver in that business. Mm-hmm. And so usually that looks like creating some processes in the business. Maybe if we're a designer, maybe style guides, things of that nature. She would need to have, she would have perhaps gathered some of her insights into a book or into a community. So she needs to have those things where if there is another, let's just assume larger, design firm who's looking for her particular expertise. So let's say they are national, and they have not penetrated the market that she's in. That she has, again, like developed some assets that they could take over without her, so that they can, replicate her success in the market. Now, they could have the exact same business model that she has. Like, let's say she has a business model that isn't particularly scalable, but their business isn't either, so they're growing through acquisition as opposed to through scale. And so that could be a very good connection. But for those who are looking to actually scale, then they may have, it'll be less attractive if her business model does not scale.
I love it. Okay. So part of that could be, because that's a great point about whether someone wants to purchase a firm to be to join a part of what they're already doing, maybe to, they're in California, but they want to get the Southeast part of the country. And so they get into that, but they don't want to necessarily be the face of the firm. You know what I mean? Where they don't want to have to be managing the people there. They want to be have them be self-sufficient and just have that be scalable. And okay, now we have this process, we can bring in more designers. And as we do, our business will grow, as opposed to acquisition, which is a whole different buyer. I would love it if you could just go a little bit deeper into that buyer's mentality, acquisition versus scalable business.
Yeah. So, when they're looking at, let's say they're looking to expand. And so they're asking themselves, is it better for me to buy a business that's already existing, or should I just go ahead and try to build it from scratch? And so when they're moving into, let's say it's a new industry, maybe a new vertical or a new territory, and they will look at what's there, right? And so if there is a existing company there that, has very strong positioning already, maybe they have deep relationships, maybe they have all the talent that's available locally, they have something that would be very hard for the acquirer to come in and build their own on their own. And so they're going to make that analysis. So you want to make sure that you have that positioning, those relationships, those, long-term contracts, those things, the industry insights, the local insights, those things that you earned over time that would make it much harder for a competitor to come in and, build something beside you.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And when we think in terms of the exit, are we, as we strategically do this in advance, are we looking at valuation, and how do we calculate that? And I know it's going to vary. I know that I've been involved in valuation of businesses in years past, and depending upon the business, the industry, and all that, it can be a complex process. And there are experts that, value businesses, but just on a more general kind of overview.
Yeah. Well, you want to be thinking about the visibility of your revenue. So looking at your business model, is it, do you have like some sort of customer concentration where every customer is like a bet the business engagement, or do you have a less concentrated customer base? Do you have contracts that are long-term or that are on a retainer basis? Do you have some sort of product that you can sell kind of pretty reliably that the buyer can look at and say, okay, I can see how I could continue to have this rather steady revenue stream? So the more visibility that your acquirer has into your revenue, so the more confidence they have in your projections, the cleaner that your financials are, the higher your multiple will be. So you want to focus on the revenue models, the business models that provide revenue visibility for your acquirers.
Okay. Awesome. And the multiplier. So, again, and I know this is such a complex subject, but I do, now that you mention that, because that's something important about. So what would be the goal, or is there a rule of thumb, in the multiplier?
Yeah. Obviously monthly recurring revenue is the gold standard. That's why SaaS companies go for gazillions of dollars. So, but you can build a version of, I guess, reoccurring revenue in your business. through like maintenance contracts. If you are a web designer and then you continue to have add-on services where you maintain them. I think law firms some build this in as well. Maybe they do estate plans and then they have kind of add-on maintenance packages, or doing outsourced general counsel, outsourced CFO type of work where you're on retainer, so you have that kind of reoccurring revenue source. And so those are things that are very attractive to acquirers.
Okay, great. And you mentioned before, when you and I were communicating before the interview today, about we are to be the chef, not the cook.
Yes.
Help me understand what that's talking about.
I get a lot of questions from women who have frameworks in the business. So this is more of the consultants and coaches, and they have like a framework about the way they deliver services, and they want to know how they can protect the frameworks. They want to have trademarks. I'm all for trademarks. I'm not anti-trademarks, and I'm very much pro framework as well. But at the end of the day, like there's always going to be someone else who can provide a solution to a client. And so you want to be known as, instead of, you want to have your framework buttoned up because you want it to work, be efficient, to know that you can deliver reliable results to your clients. But then I want you to focus on being the best at it, because there'll always be someone else who can kind of peek over and see what you're doing and try to do it too. But when you are known as the person who delivers the best, websites for interior designers, we'll just keep going there, then you don't have to worry about the others, make sure that your positioning is super tight. So everyone knows when they need a website, they're an interior designer, they need a website, it's you. It's not the other looking over the fence at you, how you do it. It's you that they come to. Because there'll always be enough clients none of us can service all the clients in our market, right? Of people you don't need them all. You just need the ones who want the chef. The ones who want the cook, let them go to the cook. But you're the chef, and they will come to you, and there'll be plenty of people to serve. So
you know what, Erin, you're gonna laugh, okay? Because I don't cook. I don't know how to cook well, so I didn't even get that analogy, but it makes sense. There's the chef. And then there are the line, short order cooks. Yeah, it's a world of difference. So yes, oh my gosh, I love that. All right. Before we wrap it up, is there anything on your heart specifically related to preparing for and strategically approaching the exit to come that we haven't talked about? Anything missing?
Well, I like to talk really to women who many times we start our businesses from a place of passion. It's a way that we nurture ourselves, our clients, our employees, and our families. And the idea of exiting might seem almost like a betrayal, but I want them to think about it as, kind of the way that we raise our children to kind of leave the nest. We want to make sure that they can go on without us. And that's a success. That we think about our businesses in the same way, because we can't keep doing what we do. No matter how much we love what we do, we can't keep doing it forever. And if we want to make sure that the work that we're doing carries on, that our employees are taken care of, that our clients are taken care of in the way that matters to us, then to make sure that it can survive in someone else's hands is the way that we do that. So that's the way I want women to think about that exit. It's an extension of their nurturing.
Wow, that is such an important point. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you said that, because you're right. Our businesses are our baby. They were birthed. I always like to say, ladies, this is not it's not rocket science, but it's not easy, because we're literally creating something from nothing. We have these great ideas and using our talents but it didn't exist before. So that's a beautiful point. And to the extent that we, from the get-go, say, you know what, these are the big dreams I have for my business. And so I am going to, from the beginning, invest in myself and in my business. And I'm going to do things strategically, not willy-nilly, not DIY, so that my clients get great results from the beginning. And that as we tweak and improve, it's exponential growth. And that's what I love about scaling. It's doing everything the right way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we wrap up, this is called the Joyful Scaling Podcast. So I always like to ask my guests, what inside your business brings you joy?
Well, I like systems. So that's been a project of mine over the last year because I have, been a sole proprietor for some time, and I just brought a team on board and putting processes in place. Like every time one goes, I'm like, oh, it sounds exciting. So one less thing that isn't like hanging out in here. So
Right. That is so true. I have to say, I don't have quite that enthusiasm as we're putting systems, improving our systems, but I love that. You were, and ladies, just on the podcast, not able to watch the video on my YouTube channel, Erin was like, yeah, this is great. She's putting her heads together. And I get it because this is progress forward. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned that you have a due diligence checklist for our listeners, and I'd love you to tell them all about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, part of selling your business is going through the process of due diligence, where the potential acquirers will be looking under the hood to see if you're duct taped together or not. And the danger is that if you don't understand the process and you're doing it from scratch when they're looking, is that you start to lose focus on making money, servicing your clients, doing the things that you need to do to support those revenue numbers. And many times things will fall apart because the revenue falls apart during that process. So being prepared ahead of time so that's a smooth process is important. And so the due diligence checklist kind of is a checklist of the things that you would expect an acquirer to look at to make sure you're thinking about those things ahead of time. Think about where your weaknesses may be and where you may need to do some work so that you're ready if somebody comes calling.
Wow, that is excellent. And we'll be sure to include the link in the show notes, ladies. So as you're listening or as you're watching this on YouTube, whichever, be sure to check the notes because that link will be there. All right. So what is the best place for our listeners to find you, Erin?
Well, my website is thinkbeyondip.com. And I also hang out on LinkedIn, Erin Austin, because I've been there for so long. I'm the Erin Austin, I guess. That's
right. The Erin Austin. That's awesome.
Just Erin Austin, but
Well, Erin, I just thank you for sharing so much today. I am sure our listeners' minds are blown and maybe overwhelmed. And if that is you, ladies, then you're in good standing and just listen back to this and reach out to Erin and take advantage of that due diligence checklist, right? So Erin, once again, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Judy.
All right. And ladies, if you have enjoyed this episode, would you please take a moment to subscribe, make sure you don't miss another one, and leave a rating and review because it helps us to improve our rankings so that more and more women like you know about this amazing content that we provide. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.